Our first speaker tonight is His Excellency Dr. Ferdinand Nicholls. And you've been hearing him on the Marcia Weeks show. And actually he's one of our hosts on Mondays. And he's one pastor that is not, deciding that he's not, he has nothing to say, but unless he's speaking in the church. He's getting involved and he's speaking. And I'm not even going to waste any more time. I'm going to just invite him to come because we are ready to go. Those online, they're ready. We're ready. Dr. Ferdinand.
Thank you, Marcia. I'm a pretty tall fellow. You get this, all right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It would be remiss of me as a minister of the gospel if I didn't start this evening with a little scripture. Along with the fact that it would also be remiss of me if I did not encourage us to give God thanks for the near scrape we have just had with the Category 1 hurricane by the name of Tammy. Tonight we're thankful that in just a matter of 24 to 48 hours, we can be seated here on the clear blue sky, when just a few hours ago, we were experiencing floods in some parts of the island, and I'm told 115 lightning strikes in 15 minutes, just I believe yesterday. It would also be remiss of me if I did not encourage us to remember our brothers and sisters in Antigua, St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla, Barbuda, Dominica, Guadeloupe, the Turks and Caicos, British Virgin Islands, and of course, as Tammy moves north, she is threatening Bermuda. But thankfully, from all reports that I've received, she is weakening. There are some people who believe God is a Bajan. I can't treat to that. He's never informed me of his nationality. But I am aware of the fact that he does listen when we talk. And he does have conversations with us. And we are grateful tonight that we have been spared the ravages of the winds, but been blessed with the water. Because we need water from any other source than our toilets. And God must have heard somebody's prayer. God must have heard somebody's petition to protect us for the people life. So I'm talking to myself. To protect us from the scourge of toilet water. Now, I'm not going to get into the details and science of all of that. Tonight, I'm going to simply allude to a couple of facts, because one of the things about this parliament is that we try to educate people and inform them concerning the realities of what is happening in a global environment and how that is impacting us here in Barbados. So let me begin, as I promised, with a couple of verses which Marcia referred to me, and I want to clear the air on the matter. I am not a servant of the Commonwealth to be referred to as His Excellency. In 2018, unknown to myself, an international organization with the UN affiliation contacted me and indicated that they wished me to be their international governor and peace ambassador for Barbados, and to be on their board of directors for the entire Caribbean. I asked them what would be the benefit of it, and if it did not benefit our people, I had no interest in it. They assured me that it did, and I've been working assiduously, and I'm not going to say anything much about what I'm doing, because sometimes when you talk, people expect things, and it just doesn't happen as I think the minister, the chief education officer said today on brass stats, overnight. It doesn't happen just tomorrow. But they invited me to take that responsibility. I took that responsibility, and a part of that responsibility carries the designation His Excellency. And that is why she has referred to me in that way. She's referred to me as a doctor, not because I'm a medical expert, but because the same organization acknowledged my involvement in Christian ministry across the length and breadth of this entire region, from as far south as Suriname to as far north as the Cayman Islands, and it granted me an honorary doctorate, which I currently carry with me. So that you understand, I did not just arrive yesterday, and I know what is going on, and there are international entities that recognize not just singers, but recognize those who operate in other areas of our country. I also mentioned that I would need to begin tonight because Marcia set it up. I don't know why she would do that, but she talked about me being a minister who does more than speak in church, and that's a fact. So let me be churchy out here for a little bit. And the reason I'm out here is because I'm commanded to be here. I don't have an option because I serve a master that has done a whole lot for me. And as a result of that, I must obey what he says. And he says, and I quote, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on the hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." But let me quote another verse tonight that helps us to understand the foundation of why we are here. And it says this, and I quote from the 18th chapter of the book of Proverbs, and I want to read it from the Passion Translation. It says this: "There are two sides to every story." Did you hear what I just said? Two sides. Some of us would say three. But there are two sides to every story. The first one to speak songs true until you hear the other side, and they set the record straight. That is why we are here tonight, to set the record straight. We're here to demand of all persons in authority what you have demanded of the international agencies and countries around the world when you stood in the United Nations and said to 193 other nations that you demanded transparency and accountability. That is what in Barbados we are demanding: accountability and transparency. Tonight in her introduction, Marcia referred to our Minister of Finance. I'm being very careful. I will stick to the titles. Minister of Finance at the 2023 annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund. He is carried on video as stating, and I will try to quote, he spoke of Barbados as a small country, and I quote, "We are faced with issues of drought relative to food security. Therefore, as part of one of the critical priorities we are using is to upgrade our sewage plants to tertiary." I stopped and asked, what is tertiary? Somebody has to explain to me what you are upgrading from and what you are upgrading to if you're saying tertiary. And I'm not going to define it because I don't know if your definition is the same as the definition in the English dictionary. So I will wait to hear what the definition is. He went on to say, so we can use that water of the sewage system as a part of the process to replenish our aquifers. Because we don't have any rivers or any such thing. Again, I pause and I ask, what happened to the square miles of water that we have around this country. We may not have rivers, but we sure have a lot of sea. And last I checked, there was a desalination facility on the highway. I think the name has changed, but I'm old-fashioned, so if I haven't adjusted and I still say a spring garden, you can correct me. I inquired of the Cayman Islands over the last several days, how do you get drinking water in Grand Cayman? Now, Grand Cayman is about half the size of Barbados. And Grand Cayman, of all the countries under the UK administration, could easily implement what our Minister of Finance is speaking about. But would you like to take a guess as to the process used in the Cayman Islands for them to obtain water that flows from their pipes? It is called desalination. The entire country is supplied by desalinated water. He said, and I quote, "We rely solely on rainfall in order to have the aquifers filled in order to manage our water. We have our desalination capacity," I'm quoting him word verbatim, "as well as a part of the process, and we are focused on that." Now I want to ask, how many things are you truly focused on? Because on one hand, we're hearing you say you're focused on the transfer of sewage to drinking water. On the other hand, we're hearing you say that you're focused on desalination. He went on to say that the reality is that there are, or should I say, don't let me go any further, let me get on to what I want to say. The reality is that these are all agendas of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations to distribute their biochemicals using air and water. Now I want to ask you a question. Very recently, Yale University carried out confirmed experimentation transmitting vaccines or the junk via the air. Are you listening to me? Via the air. Yale University carried it out, and they are now in the process of engaging that experimental process with human beings. I ask you tonight, if the entire agenda of our world elitists has been thwarted as a result of the post-pandemic informed citizenry of this world, what makes you think that they are going to stop proceeding in trying to find a way, that, if at all possible, to infect the entire world? It is not a secret that Mr. Gates has embarked on the next pandemic. They may keep it a secret from some people, but you can't keep it a secret from everybody. And in that process, at a meeting of the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, the United Nations and other organizations at that meeting indicated that they are behind in their agendas and are looking and planning to see how they can expedite these matters. And the answer is air and water. Are you listening to me? The intention is to take the water supplies of the world. As I speak to you, the United States is grappling with an issue of their water being polluted through a number of different processes: chemical disbursement, chemicals used in agriculture, increased salination in their water systems. They are faced with that issue. We here in Barbados, I am told from a report again that Marcia referred to, a statement made by one of our ministers here in Barbados that Barbadians have to adjust and not waste water, and that the whole process of this what I call it, depopulation. I don't know if that's the right terminology. No, but that's a part of it too. That's a part of it too, because if you think that it's not an intent, you need to pay attention to a TED talk by Mr. Gates, in which he focused on the depopulation of this world. And guess where he targeted? Guess where he targeted? So our minister tells us that when we travel to Miami, he says, the first stop of Barbadians outside of the Caribbean is usually Miami. And when you turn on the tap, you drink water from it in Miami. Marcia, I have never drank a drop of water from a pipe in America. Never. I haven't even drunk a drop of water from a pipe in the Cayman Islands. I drink water from a bottle. And I select which bottle because I have to determine if the plastic that they're using is leaching into the water. And so I'm very careful what particular plastic is used. And sometimes the safer plastics are very expensive. They talked about the fact that these things are done in other parts of the world: New York, London, Germany, Israel. And I asked the question, since when do we determine what is in the best interest of Barbados simply because it is done in some other part of the world? Can we not set our own agendas in Barbados? And the reality is that we can't, and I'll tell you why we can't. And a certain member of Parliament exposed why we can't, because he said that we are signatories to agreements with the United Nations, and once you are in the UN, you have to agree with them. That is not true. And I ask you to pay attention to places like Iran and Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and ask them if they sign on to UN engagements. But let me hurry along, because they tell me I only have a couple more minutes. And I wanted to touch on an aspect which you hear a lot about today, which is relative to what we're sharing, and it is this matter of sustainable development goals. Do you know what that is? Have any of you sat down? You've heard even our ministers talk about sustainable development goals. And I don't have the time to get into it tonight. There's 17 of them, and I don't have the time to touch on them, but I do have the time to touch on a couple. One has to do with quality education. Now you're beginning to understand why our educational system is suddenly being reformed, because this has to be done by 2030, and we are 2023. The next one I want to draw your attention to is gender equality. The funny thing is that while there is a gender identity being pushed, when I consider the Sustainable Development Goals, it says this on the gender equality: empowering women and girls to take control of their bodies and lives in crucial for solving our biggest social and environmental crisis. Gender inequality. They are speaking about men and women. They're not speaking about anything else. Thirdly is goal number 6, clean water and sanitation. The combination of climate change and population growth is fueling a global water crisis. I don't know, but last I checked, I would be hard-pressed to think that God would make a world that supplies would run out of. If that is the case, he is not a very efficient God, and he certainly cannot be almighty. Because it would mean that he has created an inconsistent and incomplete world. And last I checked, when he was finished, he said it was good.
Yeah, very good.
So I don't know how any human being can raise a voice above Almighty God and say that we are running out of water in this world. For God's sake, man, travel across the Atlantic and tell me if we're running out of water. Go up to the Antarctica and tell me if we're running out of water. Go to the Arctic and tell me if we're running out of water. What world do you live in? What madness! it is not hard to understand, because when wicked people want to do things, they do crazy things. And they do things that they themselves cannot explain. But one thing is sure, God don't have no water crisis in this world. As our numbers say, they grow, aquifers get overdrawn, pollution increases, and the capacity to safely dispose of wastewater is increasingly compromised. Currently, a staggering 2.2 billion people around the world do not have safe drinking water. You know the reason for that? The worthless, corrupt leadership in their countries, not the fact that there is a shortage of water. Ask Africa. Africa's problem is not accessing water. Africa's problem is accessing honest leadership. I'm not going to talk about here. This is when I get upset. Because we place the blame of these shortages and these challenges in our world at the feet of somebody who has given us every resource to be used in this planet. When in truth and in fact, the problem should be squarely placed at the feet of corrupt leadership. And I speak with no uncertain fashion here. They're corrupt. They're so corrupt that tonight, even as I speak to you, they're pressing this world toward a world war. Do you know that as I speak tonight, China and America are heading toward a potential conflict in the Mediterranean? U.S. has diverted one of her largest aircraft carriers and her carrier group into the Mediterranean, and China has already been there since May. Yes, Captain. And you got a corrupt president leading the United States. You got a corrupt minister leading, a prime minister leading the United Kingdom. You have a corrupt minister, prime minister leading France. And you have an even more corrupt leader leading Canada. And in every instance, our prime minister is up in their face, holding their hands and shaking their hands. Some of the most corrupt leadership in this world. I've often been told, don't pay attention to what people say. Pay attention to what people do. And you know, the good boss upstairs has made it clear to us. When he talked about he's not interested in how you feel, how you think, and where your heart is. What he's interested in is what you do. And so my mother has always taught me, judge a person by their actions and not simply by what they say. And when I see an image with you holding the hand of a man that could not speak in the European Union because the European Union parliamentarians chastised him when he got there because of his undemocratic totalitarian responses to a situation in Canada concerning mandatory vaccinations, that individual has no right to speak in a single Caribbean country. Don't even invite him to the Bahamas. Friends of all and satellites of none is what we were birthed in as a nation. But I don't have the time to expound on all of this. I wish I did, but my final goal is affordable and clean energy. That's one of the sustainable development goals. And so you can see that the agenda is not being driven here in Barbados. We had a parliamentarian talk about how we have to comply with our UN agreements. We don't have to comply with nothing. We are a sovereign country. And I want to hear what is going to be the position of our government come May 2024, when they are one of the 194 countries to vote on the World Health Organization taking over our sovereignty in the next pandemic. I want to hear what is going to be their position by the end of this year, because they have already had meetings concerning this matter where they're trying to push through a resolution in the United Nations, experiencing serious resistance, especially from African countries. And we're talking about bringing ourselves into alignment with Africa. but at the same time you want to hug and kiss up and all of the rest of it is some of these perverted, immoral, worthless leaders of the world. I am here as what I'm supposed to be, a beacon of light. And I have discovered that when that is on, darkness disappears. Darkness is an absence of light. That is why you are gathered here tonight as the light for this nation, as the people's opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Good night and God bless you.